Trump has officially hit his 60-day window requiring congressional approval for further military action in Venezuela. But the administration is saying, JK, this doesn't apply to me at all. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about the fact that the Venezuela policy doesn't exist. Let's get into it. Hit subscribe. Okay. So the War Powers Resolution, this is an act of Congress that says that if the president's allowed to engage in military action for up to 60 days without congressional approval, right? And this is, of course, just good common sense because the U.S. doesn't always have time in the era of the fast-breaking national security crisis for the president to go to Congress, have a big debate about whether or not military action is justified, and then get authorization and get a declaration of war and go do the military action. And so instead, the War Powers Resolution says, listen, the president gets 60 days where he can run a military operation in response to some kind of fast-breaking national security crisis, but then you have to have Congress approve it. So if the U.S. president, though, cannot obtain congressional approval for his military action after 60 days, the law says those actions must be terminated. Pentagon says their first strike occurred September 2nd, when White House officials formally notified Congress of the strikes on September 4th, making today day 61. But according to the White House, the U.S. military says that the 15 strikes, which have killed 65 people, guys, they're not hostilities. That is literally what these are not hostilities. According to the War Powers Resolution, an anonymous White House official told the Post that the Pentagon's operation comprises precise strikes conducted largely by unmanned aerial vehicles launched from naval vessels in international waters at distances too far away for the crews of the targeted vessels to endanger American personnel. And therefore, it's not military action at all. Now, you may think to yourself, I don't know, killing people with the U.S. military, bombing them, seems like a military action. That seems like hostilities. Now, here's the funny thing. This isn't the first time this argument has been made. When then President Obama directed the United States to participate in a NATO-led air war over Libya that ended up lasting more than 60 days, Congress had not passed a spending bill for the operation, but for policy reasons, President Obama didn't want to halt or scale back American participation before it was over. Yet, one White House faction came up with the theory that Obama actually had the authority to continue the campaign without changes because the American involvement fell short of hostilities. Obama, of course, embraced that argument and kept going. And on this channel, we have been repeatedly critical of the Obama administration for its extremely liberal military interpretation of the law of war and U.S. law in general. For example, we always talk about Anwar al-Awlaki. He was certainly an ideological ally of al-Qaeda. He was a terrorist and he was wrong. He was a bad person. And he believed in Islamic terrorism as a thing you could do against the U.S. government. But he never bombed anyone. He never fired a rifle. His crime was making YouTube videos. And he was a U.S. citizen living in Yemen, making YouTube videos. And the Obama administration was like, we're tired of this guy encouraging jihadists. Let's bomb him. And they did. They killed a U.S. citizen, knowing he was a U.S. citizen, targeted him, despite having never picked up a weapon, never engaged in an act of terrorism himself, and they killed him via memo. The Obama White House wrote a memo that said he made enough YouTube videos that he's a hostile actor. We can drone strike him, no problem. And because of those actions and this other one, this was also new to me, right? To say, well, they're not really hostilities, we're just bombing people, is also delusional. Now, if the White House position is accepted unchallenged by Congress, this would mean that essentially, according to one analyst, quote, the U.S. government can continue its killing spree at sea, though time limits imposed by the War Powers Resolution are irrelevant. And he continues, quote, the administration's theory places a broad swath of common U.S. military action, standoff strikes with little risk to U.S. forces, outside the scope of War Powers Resolution and its restrictions. The White House is doing so while it postures not only for further killing at sea, but also for military action against Venezuela. This legal theory could further complicate congressional efforts to rein in unauthorized military action by not just this president, but future presidents. Because remember, if a president can unilaterally strike people from a distance at any time, at any place they want, with no congressional oversight, what that means, remember, even if you support President Trump and you say this is fine, these are killing drug boats, sure, fine. That means that there could be a future president, let's say a President AOC, who says, you know what? If fentanyl is a threat to the U.S., so is climate change. And so she says, we're going to do strikes against oil refineries all around the world. Any oil refinery is a target, right? Would you have a problem with it? Yeah, I would. I think that would be kind of fucked up. And again, at odds with the fundamental concept of the War Powers Resolution and the nature of what it means to be at war entirely. And yet, that's what a future left-wing president would be completely authorized to do if Congress simply rolls over, right? Like, where is Congress in all this? And here's my problem. Well, I just laid out my deepest problem, but there's also more of a problem because look, Pete Hegseth has also said that Congress isn't even allowed to engage in oversight. The only way the DOD can speak to Congress at all is via approved Pentagon channels. And that's, as we talked about earlier, that is an insane policy because one, as an American citizen, I have a right to talk to my congressman. It's in the Constitution. I have a right to petition the government for redress of grievances. That means, and I don't surrender that right as a U.S. soldier. Any soldier can write their congressman about the problems they're experiencing in the military. That's just a right they have. And trust me, soldiers abuse it all the time. They write their congressman with the dumbest shit. But guess what? Oftentimes, Congress will send one of their aides to a military base, to a unit, and say, yo, we got a letter that one of our soldiers, that one of my constituents was sexually assaulted in her unit and nobody's done anything. And you have to take that aide and you got to go sit them down. You got to say, okay, here's our policy. Here's our procedures. And if you're smart, you go, here's the investigation we did about that incident. Here you go. You can read it. As you can see, we're doing the right thing. Why do we go through that rigmarole as the American military? Wouldn't it just be faster to just not answer Congress? Yeah, but Congress has an oversight function. It is intrinsic to legislating, right? You cannot legislate blindly. You have to gather information about what the budgets you pass are being spent on. And you have to gather information about the world that you're existing in. I mean, imagine if Congress wasn't allowed to know what the Pentagon was doing, where it was allocating its funds, where operations were taking place. How would you ever pass a budget? How would you ever author any legislation? Well, that's what Pete Hegseth is trying to create. A simple, create for Congress a world of delusion where he has no idea. Military operations or whatever Pete Hegseth says they are, if he decides to say anything at all. And then in that information-deprived environment, we have an administration whose public statements make no sense. The Director of National Intelligence, literally just a few days ago, said that Trump ended America's era of regime change. The National Intelligence Director, Tulsi Gabbard, said that the new policy is about America first. And she says a one-size-fits-all approach of toppling regimes and walking away with more enemies than allies is done and gone. She said President Trump understands that not everyone shares our exact values or systems of governance, and that's okay. This is, again, a fundamental realist look at the world. She added that her remarks reflect a broader shift towards pursuing interests and finding where shared common ground exists. And more importantly, she's like, listen, we're done with this regime change. Right? But then, look, Trump turns around and says, actually, Maduro's days are numbered, but I doubt we're going to go to war with Venezuela, despite the fact that we're going to be striking Venezuelan military facilities on land, which, guys, if that's not war, I don't know what is. So again, this is like, are we trying to change regimes or not? And in the context of all this, even the UN Commissioner for Human Rights, is saying that these U.S. airstrikes on drug trafficking boats is an unacceptable extrajudicial killing. And the problem is that, again, if the administration has more evidence that these people were engaged, not in a crime, because remember, a crime in the United States, and this is the fundamental problem here. if this is a war, right, then go to Congress, fulfill the war powers resolution, get your declaration of war or your congressional approval. It doesn't have to be a formal declaration of war. It can just be authorization for use of military force. If it's a criminal action, if there's a policing action, then arrest the people who committed the crime, put them on trial, investigate the networks, arrest the whole networks, right? And this isn't new. The Coast Guard has been doing counter narcotics operations for years. They arrest people. They either turn them over to their home countries for trial and prosecution along with the evidence, or they take them to the United States and put them on trial, while also, again, interrogating them, learning about their network, doing analysis of the drugs that are being trafficked, right? Like, this is how you do it. You dismantle a criminal network, just like a terror network, using good intelligence. But the administration says it's neither of those things. It's whatever we want it to be. We want all the benefits. We want all the power of going to war, big weapons, carrier strike groups, but we want all of the moral backing of going after criminals, but we don't want the parts where we have to get a war declaration from Congress. We don't want the parts of criminal prosecution where we have to present evidence and put people on trial, right? We don't want any of the constraints. We want to pick and choose. Whatever option gives us the right to use the most force, we want that. But that's not how the American system works. Thanks to Al Verchesky, Alan Knutson, Christine Schumann, Dan M., Deborah Oppenheimer, all of our Lieutenant tier members. We couldn't do it without you guys. Become a member at Combat Vet News or become a YouTube member. The link is just down below. It's super easy. Just hit member and we're working on getting you guys access to the Combat Vet News premium site. Thanks. Cheers.